The Anaheim Angels, a franchise who gives its fanbase such high hopes every April, only to see those hopes fade away long before season's end. A franchise hungry for postseason play, hungry to ride the GOAT and the unicorn all the way to baseball's promised land. And a franchise that might, just might, finally achieve this very dream here in 2023. On a random March afternoon at Diablo Stadium in Tempe, the spring training home of the Angels, owner Artie Moreno met with Sports Illustrated's Tom Verducci to discuss his decision to keep the team he had nurtured and loved since 2003. In that interview, Moreno also talked about prior signings of marquee, albeit aging, free agents. He admitted to wanting to go after Trey Turner this past offseason, but GM Perry Manassian convinced him otherwise. Artie explained, and I quote, "It's about the distribution of money. Is it one player who makes a splash, or is it, hey, we can spend this money on 2 or 3 players?
Bruh.
Diversify is, you know the saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? The same principle. Yeah, diversify.
Thanks, Ken. Good for Moreno, the owner with an estimated net worth of $4.7 billion, for finally learning the benefits of diversification in year 21. So for the first time in a long time, the proverbial opening day optimism in Anaheim had some serious substance behind it, because for the first time in a long time, the Angels possessed the very ingredient that baseball's powerhouses had based their entire success on: depth. Depth is the reason that you can lose a Walker Buehler here, or a Ronald Acuna Jr. there, or even trade a Blake Snell in his prime and still have success over the long haul, because the whole becomes greater than the sum of the parts. Because in a long, grueling 162-game season where you play day in and day out, you're more likely to have something go wrong than everything go right. Or to put it simply, shit happens.
It happens. What? Shit? Sometimes.
Thank you, Tom Hanks. Now go buy the Oakland A's. So instead of going after Turner, the Angels addressed some real concerns. They signed starter Tyler Anderson to $39 million over 3 years. Now, no one was expecting another 2.5 ERA season from Anderson, because that's just ridiculous. But the Angels were certainly hoping for more than a 5.5 ERA. I think what's encouraging about Anderson is that in most of his starts, he's really been hurt by that one big inning. But then he'll go on to eat 5 to 6 valuable innings. And Anderson has actually generated more swing and miss than ever before. The problem is he's not attacking the strike zone or the edges of the zone like in years prior. With better command and sequencing, Anderson should pitch closer to his career norms, aka a $13 million pitcher. He can't exactly be Noah Syndergaard bad, can he? On the offensive side, the Angels signed Brandon Drury and traded for the perpetually underrated Gio Urshela, both versatile infielders who hit about 20% above league average in 2022. Drury signed for just $17 million across 2 years. He's seen time at second and first base, while providing some much-needed pop to this Angels lineup. Urshela, earning $8.4 million in 2023, has played all across the infield, most notably filling in for the oft-injured Anthony Rendon at third base. Unfortunately, Urshela went down with a season-ending injury, but while in there he got the job done and really became a testament of the Angels' depth. And Manassian truly lengthened the lineup by trading for slugger Hunter Renfroe, who's making $11.9 million in 2023 and basically got swapped for one-time Halo Andrew Heaney. This trade didn't get much attention, but for this Angels lineup, it was a much-needed addition. Between 2018 and 2022, the Angels were the 4th best contact-hitting team in all of baseball. Sounds good, right? The problem is, aside from Ohtani and Trout, they didn't produce much thump, as their isolated power, ISO, ranked more middle of the pack. Combined with their terrible on-base skills, it's no wonder that during that span, the Angels produced a below-average offense. Enter Hunter Renfroe, who began the season with a career .250 ISO and hit 29 home runs in 125 games played in 2022. Renfroe, aka Mike Trout's twin separated at birth, decided he didn't want to just be like Mike. He became Mike Trout, producing an .870 OPS in April with 7 bombs, solid enough defense, and a cannon of an arm. Of course, Renfroe is also known for being a streaky hitter and has since come down to earth. But as the OG Mike Trout told Mookie Betts, it's not just one or two guys carrying the Angels anymore.
We got a deep lineup. You know, we got guys that are in there can do damage. It's just not one, two guys that are, you know, carrying us. Just be able to go out there and just, you know, pass the baton.
Thanks, GOAT. The Angels signed lefty Matt Moore, one of the best under-the-radar relievers in 2022, for $7.55 million, and he was spectacular early on until going down with an oblique injury. And in perhaps the best bang-for-your-buck signing of the entire offseason, the Angels snagged Carlos Estevez for a total of $13.5 million over 2 seasons. Upon leaving Colorado, he's simply become one of the best closers in baseball in 2023. To reiterate just how much of a steal this signing has been, that's an average annual value, AAV, of $6.75 million to pitch like Edwin Diaz for a third of Edwin Diaz's annual salary. Sticking with the bullpen, a bullpen that had a pedestrian 3.95 ERA in 2022 with even worse peripheral stats, the Angels signed Jacob Webb and Chris Davinsky to minor league deals, and both have made solid contributions to the pen so far in 2023. All in all, Manassian spent just under $60 million this offseason on 12 different players, much more than just 2 or 3 players. To put into context, the quartet of Renfroe, Drury, Urshela, and Estevez cost $35.5 million to produce about 4 wins above replacement through June, while Anthony Rendon is making $38 million in 2023 to sit on the IL and have a sub-700 OPS. That's the power of depth.
Mike, anything you want to say?
Just let the kids play.
Thank you, GOAT. Along with all the veteran acquisitions this offseason, the Angels have perfectly balanced out their roster with the injection of young blood. 5 different rookie relievers have made their MLB debut this season, including Mr. Taking Care of Business Sam Bachman, taken in that 2021 draft where the Angels famously drafted all pitchers, and the volunteer fireman Ben Joyce. Joyce, who averages 102 miles per hour on his fastball, unfortunately went down with an elbow injury. But that's okay because Jose Soriano can also fire absolute gas in his absence. On the position players side, the Angels have had contributions from a variety of players with a year of service time or less. Mickey Moniak, whom the Angels got in the Noah Syndergaard trade last season, has absolutely raked while providing some clutch moments late in games. Although Moniak's strikeout to walk ratios certainly scream regression, he still provides value with his athleticism and speed. Matt Dice has helped out with strong plate discipline and capable defense behind the plate, especially when considering he hasn't done a whole lot of catching these past couple of years. Dice is actually filling in for a rookie stud the Angels received in another trade with the Phillies, Logan O'Hoppe. O'Hoppe had a scorching start to the year, posting an .886 OPS through the first few weeks of the season. Maybe the Phillies should just not trade with the Angels. Unfortunately, O'Hoppe went down with a terrible shoulder injury. He's recently started throwing again, and if he does come back late in the season as projected, it should be a huge offensive boost for the Angels in what could very well be a pennant race down the stretch. And finally, there's a 22-year-old rookie shortstop who grew up idolizing Derek Jeter. No, not the one batting in the low 200s. I'm talking about Zachary Adam Neto, the greatest player to ever don the Halo uniform. You know those glazing memes the casuals use whenever MLB posts about Shohei Ohtani? Well, that's me when it comes to Zach Neto. I mean, this kid is just something special. The 13th overall pick in the 2022 MLB draft, yes, last year's draft, became the first player from his class to debut in the big leagues. Neto oozes swag as much as he oozes tools. He can hit, he can run, he can throw, and his instincts are off the charts. And while outs above average doesn't necessarily agree with me, this is what I have to say to that.
Turn that some sideways and stick it straight up, you candy!
Thank you, future President of the United States of America, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Through 55 games, Zach Neto has simply hit 13% above league average, with 1.3 Fangraphs WAR, and his bat really started to come to life in June, crushing the ball to the tune of 1,154 OPS through 37 plate appearances, before an oblique injury sent him to the IL. The rookies and youngsters have no doubt performed, and in some cases exceeded expectations. But of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the big three: 38.6, 37.1, and $30 million. That's what Rendon, Trout, and Shohei Ohtani are getting paid by the Angels in 2023, respectively. Any team that has the greatest player in the world will certainly have a high floor, as well as high expectations. Well, when at one point you're the MLB home run and OPS leader at the plate, while leading the majors in opponents' batting average on the mound, and striking out hitters almost 33% of the time, I'd call that meeting expectations. Shohei Ohtani is a presumptive MVP, and there's really not much more to say without this turning into a 2-hour essay on the greatness of Shohei Ohtani. Michael Nelson Trout. Once the unanimous best player in the world, he's now called washed in 2023 because of an admittedly long slump. He dropped to a season-low 812 OPS on June 16th in Kansas City. 812. Yeah, I'll take that 812 OPS, especially if it comes with some of the best defense of his career and still elite speed. Look, Mike Trout is obviously way better than this. He'll be just fine. Don't believe me? Well then just focus on all these big red circles. And finally, Mr. Hollywood lifestyle himself, Anthony Rendon.
Call me a bitch, huh? Yeah, you did. Listen, yeah, you did.
Thank you, Tony. Look, there's no way to sugarcoat it. Rendon has been one of the worst contracts in baseball history. In 4 seasons with the Halos, this year included, he's played a grand total of 195 games, with a 251 batting average and a 760 OPS. The injuries have really sapped him of his power, and on top of that, he's played some pretty bad defense at third base. However, there's a slight chance that these last few months can turn into sort of a saving grace for the Artie Moreno signing. After all, Rendon hasn't lost his on-base skills, as his 360 OBP with the Halos is just a tad below his 369 OBP with the Nationals. In limited playing time, he's been one of the toughest hitters to strike out in 2023, and he doesn't chase pitches out of the strike zone, like at all. That's a pretty decent floor already, and it makes you wonder if the Angels can just get this guy healthy for a good stretch of time. Rendon doesn't need to have an OPS over 1,000 again to be useful in 2023. He just needs to be slightly better than this.
Yeah, motherfucker. Calm down.
In what could be Shohei Ohtani's final season with the Halos, the Angels keep hovering around the final wildcard spot as we head into July. And as we've seen, given all the injuries and underperformance, that's pretty impressive, especially for this franchise. But this roster still has clear holes. They're one of the worst teams on the bases, and their defense is just about average. And it still feels like they're one impact bat short of making this lineup truly terrifying. The bullpen has been stellar by ERA, but they've been a little too lucky as they walk too many batters and don't strike enough guys out. Their starting rotation right now is one of the worst at limiting base runners and has generally been more middle of the pack. It's ironic because starting pitching has been a problem for a while now, but entering 2023, Patrick Sandoval and Reed Detmers were expected to kill that narrative. Well, that hasn't necessarily been the case. It hasn't been all bad, as Detmers has had some lights-out starts this season with a strikeout rate among the top 10 of all starting pitchers. And Griffin Canning, the hometown kid who's been plagued by injuries, has really started to turn a corner, and he's arguably been the savior of this pitching staff. But Patrick Sandoval's regression is concerning, as his strikeout rate has totally plummeted after being one of the better strikeout pitchers the last 2 seasons. It's an interesting case, because aside from a dip in fastball velocity, his stuff is basically the same as last season, when he had an above average 24% strikeout rate. Lately, he's been using his slider less, and his wicked changeup a lot more. so that might help him boost his strikeout numbers. I do think that Sandoval will eventually be better, but if the Angels want some insurance, and they should, the prize of the deadline would be Eduardo Rodriguez of the Detroit Tigers. But it's complicated for a variety of reasons. One potential complication is that if the Angels get E-Rod, they'll likely blow past the luxury tax, which might not sit well with old Artie. But on the other hand, they were interested in signing him a few years ago, back when he was a free agent. And it could be the perfect opportunity to show Shohei Ohtani that yes, Moreno is willing to do whatever it takes to win. Luxury tax be damned. The Angels don't have the greatest farm system to begin with. However, they do have some top-heavy young talent, such as southpaw Kai Bush and top-catching prospect Edgar Cuero, who might be more expendable with Logan O'Hoppe in the organization now. And of course, there's Joe Adell, once one of baseball's top prospects who just hasn't produced at the big league level. But he still has that pedigree attached to him, and you have to figure, if the Angels aren't going to use him, might as well trade him. I think, given the state of their system, they'll most likely pursue trades that involve upcoming free agents. You know, I think it's all pretty self-explanatory. At the time of making this video, the Angels have already replenished some of their infield depth, trading for Eduardo Escobar and Mike Moustakas. Now, the Angels are only paying them the minimum salary, and this could be a sign of things to come, that Moreno will only approve trades that cost him the least amount of money. Or the Angels are simply thinking bigger picture and trying to save that money for a potentially more impactful, but probably more expensive deal down the road. Considering the urgency to make the postseason this year more than any other because of Shohei Ohtani's impending free agency, I expect the latter to be true. I expect the Angels to go all in at the trading deadline. The path to the postseason won't come easy. It'll likely come through the third wildcard. It'll take a bit of luck. Actually, it'll probably take something just short of divine intervention. But if there were ever a year that everything was lined up for the Angels to make a run, 2023 would be it. They still have Ohtani for at least a few more months. Mike Trout will be better. The pitching staff should improve. And the kids give this roster a whole new look. And this team has some fight too. Don't get me wrong, they've certainly had their Angels moments. But they've also played some of the elite teams in baseball really tough and have won some gritty, edge-of-your-seat comeback thrillers.
In that locker room, we're just a bunch of dudes who get after it, and it shows out here. Yeah, we don't stop quitting. We're a bunch of dogs that just like to fight.
Thanks, Sac Neto. You dog. This Angels team actually reminds me a bit of the Fighting Phils from last season, a team that came out of nowhere to crash the postseason party and make a run all the way to the World Series behind their superstars, veteran leaders, and just the right amount of youthful energy in their lineup. Man, wouldn't that be something? To finally see what Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani can truly do when the stakes are raised, the lights are brightest, and the whole world is watching. The GOAT and the Unicorn deserve it. The city of Anaheim deserves it. Baseball deserves it.